This is a great transition right into the Q&A so we can engage a little bit more. And I would like to invite the other two speakers who had presented their projects, their winning project case studies. I'd like to invite back Catalina Hepp and Brianne Gilkinson. And we can take some questions from the audience and see if we can have a dialogue around everybody's projects. And everyone, you're welcome to continue to add your questions into the chat. Welcome everyone. Meet each other. It occurs to me right in this moment that you're all when we do these group chats, you're all meeting each other for the first time. Alex, one of the things that you said during your talk really stayed with me because I think it's not talked about enough, is you said the words being of service. And I always kind of think of this when I think of service design because it's such a beautiful foundational piece. And I wanted to pull out this thing that I have. Service to others is the rent that you pay for your room here on earth. And it feels like such a basic concept, this idea of being of service, but you so beautifully illustrated how believing this deep down can actually help guide your decisions and guide your perspective as a designer. So my question to you is, with that frame, it would be wonderful if everyone thought that way. How do you invite others into stopping and really holding space to kind of embody that characteristic?
That's a really great question. And it's something that I've learned over time. I've had to check myself a few times, depending on the project, the room that you're in. And like I was sharing in my presentation, often in the presence of elders, you quickly realize your role. And I think early in my design practice, I don't know, you have that notion of wanting to stamp your mark on a design, saying, I'm the designer, this is my product, this is my service. Especially when I spent time in the startup world, you kind of have that hero kind of startup attitude. And I think it's when you start to get the opportunity to work directly with, say, communities and families, you start to realize your position and your privilege. That's probably the way that I learned really quickly, actually, because you get put into place by, like I said, like your elders. And so I think for people, designers that don't often have that opportunity, again, like if you can review your practice as much as possible, start to think about what is the legacy that you want to leave behind. You start to naturally think about service as a key principle. You're thinking about what do you want to leave behind for others to be able to pick up. So a lot of the complex issues that we face in our lifetime won't be solved in our lifetime. So how do you contribute to that bigger picture? So that's probably how I'd answer that.
Yeah, this theme of reframing the narratives that are kind of pre-programmed. How do we undo that work and kind of just have a different dialogue around it? And with that, I'll kind of pivot a question to everyone and say, for the two that were presenting your projects, and maybe for Alex as well, if there's an example of that, what are some narratives that you have reframed, whether they were your own coming into it or the narratives of the clients, and how have they been reframed as a result of your project?
I can answer that. I think this was my first real project after university, so during university, actually my last year. So I've spent 4 years reading a lot about design and learning about the theory. And it was such a talk, like to go into the school and meet the students and the teachers and realize that like my plan didn't work. My timing was wrong. Like when you speak with the children, you realize like, okay, what was I thinking? And when I was in my room, when I was in the school, like sitting in my desk, that's such a different ideas. And I think that contrast is so necessary. Like we always speak about working with users and the service design works like that, but I think you have to really embed yourself in the context to be able to make that. And in my case, it was the user personas that didn't like work with the reality I was working. I think that was the first thing I had to reframe or rethink, because it's, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the project, but for this project, it didn't make any sense. And it was the people, like the students that told me that. And I had to hear and try to change my methodology to adapt it to the reality I was facing.
Mhm.
I'll say there's been a lot of reframing throughout the work we've done. At the most basic level, a reframing of constraints. There's, especially at an organizational level, there's a lot of assumptions about what is possible and what's not possible, and reframing that into opportunities has been important. At a human level, I think it was very important for us to reframe our services, obviously, to be perceived from the perspective of the people on the other ends of them. That's obvious. I think what might get lost in that is that until we do that, there are a lot of assumptions about why people are behaving the way they are. Why aren't they picking up the phone when we call them? Why don't they call back when we ask them to call back? And when we reframed and those observations, or we challenged those assumptions, we understood that people were scared. They didn't know what to say. They didn't want to say the wrong thing. They wanted to be with somebody when they called us back, because they didn't know if they were going to remember everything that was being said. So I think from a human perspective, we've done a lot of reframing in the organization to challenge the assumptions we hold about why people are behaving the way they are, and then make sure that we're connecting with empathy to make sure that we're meeting needs without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have to agree with you both. And just to add, I think that's a lot of the job, is to frame. You're always constantly reframing. And I think that the difference that I find in my role too, so in a professional sense, you might be the principal designer, the lead designer. That's in your professional role. But when I'm engaging with community and working with people, you have to remove your title from that conversation. You have to meet them on a human level and actually build that relationship. And so in the reframing, for me anyway, in my practice, is you're looking at kind of dissolving yourself out of that picture, and you're looking at trying to build the capacity and build a movement, so they can kind of solve their own solutions. That's how I've seen it unfold for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And kind of following from that, one of the audience questions that's related is thinking about kind of the inherent biases that exist in our methods and processes that we're already coming in with. Are there any thoughts or ideas or tips on uncolonizing the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like that's coming to me. I think the more time you can invest in the relationship with people, understand their worldview, their drivers, and their processes, the faster you're able to build a relationship, and then again reframe and move through the process. If you come with kind of predetermined ideas and tools and practices, yeah, you can, in particular in my situation, you can recolonize those interactions and the outcome. It's just a constant unlearning of your practice and building that relationship.
Yeah, it's a heavy question, isn't it? And that in itself, I feel, is an iterative process. Brian, did you want to add to that, or should I move on? I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I think what's important is that we have a lot of growth in this area, and we have a lot of to continue along this path. I think what's been helpful for us is we've instituted a process where at the very beginning of any engagement that we do, we run through an assumptions and biases exercise. We've taken it from Airbnb. You can look it up online. I think it's a start to identify what are we bringing into this space. What biases do we have? What assumptions do we hold? And how can we go about a process of being very intentional to have to not cause harm, recolonize all of those things, and impose ourselves on our process and our insights, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that I think it's really important the team you work with, like working with people who are different from you, who think differently, and who will be able to criticize or help you change the way you are doing or thinking things. So I agree. I think there's a lot to do still, like to get there, but it's always good to having someone who is able to question the project and question what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another theme that has come up a lot today. Just what do the people around you, what are their values and how do they embody them, can affect the outcome. Another question that came up from the audience that's kind of along a similar thread, but I'm wondering if there's maybe some different information from there, or maybe an example. How do we best enter a space with a different culture than our own without carrying prejudices, and how do we best communicate to learn?
I can add a little bit to that, and it's similar to the previous question if I think about it too. I think it's really important to engage in partnership. So what I referenced in the image of two canoes, you can see a joining of those two, a bridging of those two different worldviews. So engaging in partnership is really important, and similar to what you're both saying is having a team that's reflective of the local area is really important too. So yeah, naturally start to engage in that process. And what I was sharing in my presentation, in a Māori worldview, a lot of the currency is the relationship. So the more time you invest in the relationship, the more fruitful the action will be. So yeah, if you overinvest in the relationship, you can reap the benefits, and you start to see that play out in years to come. So engaging can be difficult, can be a challenge. There might be a relationship you have to someone that can unlock the door for you to speak to an Indigenous community or another culture. But once you have that in, as soon as you start to invest in that time, you start to become almost like one team, one group.
Mm-hmm. Can you share an example? What is a relationship that you're really proud of, that you have built and invested in?
There was a movement called that's called Te Puanga Mara, which is the kind of the sprout, the seed for the future referencing a local star that we refer to for the new year. That started 5 years ago, and there was essentially a bunch of agencies coming together with a whole bunch of projects and portfolios and investment. And they wanted to just do stuff. They just wanted to get on the ground and roll out their programs and, you know, appear to be doing great things and then report that. But the relationship started of just 2 years of just getting into a room, understanding each other, seeing each other for who we are, really trying to draw back the, take off your hat, your title, and really understand what the real issues are, the lived reality, the cultural reality is really important. And seeing young people that were once shy, didn't engage in any public interaction or talk about strategy or design in any way, and now, fast forward 5 years, are now becoming experts and practitioners in their field, being procured into local agencies to deliver projects. So I'm really proud of seeing the evolution of practice, seeing our agencies are kind of stepping back and sharing those power dynamics and decision making. I think it's been incredible.
Yeah, no, that's lovely.
I'll say for us, we have our role in the public sector is such that we sometimes have different, the businesses we serve may have different concerns and needs than people who've experienced injuries and illnesses at work, and those can sometimes be opposing. And what I'm really proud of with our team is the relationship that we've developed with all of the people we serve who've engaged in our research, and also with some very influential stakeholders who represent the people we serve and who are really the ones that in many cases are their voices. And we've engaged with them and we've shared our research, our raw research back. And I don't know if anyone's ever had the experience of sharing your research outputs back to the people you've researched. But it can be intimidating, but in fact, it's been a very trust building, positive experience. And so that's something that I think we've been pretty proud of.
Mm-hmm. Catalina, did you have anything to add before I move on?
I was thinking about the other question about how to approach different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And my project was all based in approaching different cultures. I just discovered theater during that project, and I think it's so amazing because we always talk about empathy, but from a really rational level. Like, oh yes, I'm gonna put myself in your shoes, but like acting and really moving like other people, it was such an amazing experience, and it connects with others from an emotional level. So it may be kind of weird to put like acting or role playing in some steps of the project, but I think it's great, like working with your body and trying new ways to approach and meet people, not just like talking or reading or writing, but expressing in other ways.
Yeah. So we've got, let me double check. We've got one quick question for Brianne, and then I will ask kind of a wrap up from everybody. The success matrix that you use to measure your result, how did you come up with that?
It's a good question. To generate our success metrics, we had to start with our, we tried to find things where there was a business outcome that people really cared about and that we mapped to an experience outcome. So for example, when we talk about documents that have been submitted online digitally, from an experience perspective, it's critical for people to be able to send us information when they want to on their own terms. From a business perspective, receiving that information digitally is a complete game changer, because we used to have 5 or 6 different people touch a document before it got through our system. So our intent was to identify success metrics that balanced business needs and the needs of the people we serve. And by measuring that, we could have, we could drive benefits in both areas.
Thank you. So we're nearing our time, but I wanted to call back to something that that Alex said about we can predict the future by designing part of the future. And I want to ask you in one word, if you had to answer, what is a future that you want? A future, it doesn't have to be the, you know, one of the futures that you would like to see.
Equitable.
Yeah, it's a tough one to narrow it down, isn't it?
It's really challenging, but if I had to frame it in one word, it'll be thriving.
Ooh. What do you think, Catalina?
It's kind of cliche, but like collaborative and participant, and where people are protagonists of their life and experiences.
Oh, I love that. Equitable, thriving, and collaborative. And if I had to choose one towards that, it would be, you may already guess, kind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so very much for this dialogue and for sharing your work and your thoughts. We will wrap up this Q&A session and move on to the next, but I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.